If you've ever seen one of these psychics at work on stage or on television, you'll know just how impressive they can be. I think part of this is because many people want to believe in the supernatural. They want to believe in life after death, and many of them are present when they have these psychic exhibitions and things because they're looking for answers. They want to communicate with their deceased loved one or whatever. I think another part of this is down to human psychology. Our brains form a simplified model of the world around us, and that allows us to predict with a reasonable amount of accuracy how the world around us will behave. And that was an invaluable survival trait for our distant ancestors as they leapt from bough to bough in the jungle. And it was also useful for our not-so-distant ancestors when they were out hunting and they wanted to hit their prey with a spear or a stone. And it's pretty useful today when we attempt to predict whether our current speed means that we can make it through a yellow light before it goes red. The models aren't perfect representations of reality. They're rough approximations that are accurate enough to work most of the time. And if the model fails, then we just adjust it until it works again. An extreme example of this would be somebody having an arm amputated and reaching out for things with the absent limb. One of the things that appeals about magic conjuring tricks and psychics as entertainment is that the tricks show us something that appears to violate these models, and that gets our attention. We can't help it, it's a survival process. You can't help being intrigued by something unusual. And you run through the standard evaluation criteria. Something strange. Is it a threat? Can it eat me? Can I eat it? Can I shag it? And experiencing something that appears to violate the natural laws of the universe is intriguing and unsettling, and it can give rise to this creeped out feeling that you sometimes get if the experience is particularly at odds with what you expect. So let's take a sceptical look at your experience on the bus. First off, your initial impression of this woman was that she looked a little odd. So from the outset, you were a bit wary, and you probably weren't expecting normal behaviour from this person. When you accidentally made eye contact with her, she did something that is totally unexpected from a stranger in New York. She moved closer to you, and she began acting in a friendly manner. Now, at this point, I suspect you were feeling pretty uncomfortable, if not a little bit threatened by this unexpected change in circumstance. Then she starts to babble. Now, let's face it, no matter how much we like to feel compassion for people who are mentally ill, many of us are very uncomfortable when we're presented with it face to face in this way, unexpectedly. If people are behaving in a manner that we find to be irrational, it means that they're unpredictable. We don't have a model that we can use to deal with them, and there's always the suspicion that they might become violent if they're provoked. So that suggests something to me about your possible emotional state during these events. If you weren't feeling overtly threatened, you were uncomfortable. What's very interesting about your reporting of these events on the bus is that you say that most of what she said didn't make any sense, but some things that she'd said were really odd. And I think that's very significant. Psychics and mediums use a technique called cold reading to pick up on both verbal and non-verbal cues, and then to use that to direct the course of the dialogue. And we all do this to some degree in our dealings with other people. You must have been in a situation where you've been talking to somebody and you've said something that obviously makes them feel uncomfortable, and so you change the subject. Or conversely, you hit on something that's of interest to them, a passion of theirs, and so you continue to explore that route. What cold reading relies on is this ability to pick up on these cues, and of our ability to discard anything that doesn't fit the model we're building in our heads. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're out to mislead somebody. It's something that we just do naturally as part of our interaction with other people. What I found interesting is that you said most of what she said was pure nonsense. She was referring to you by somebody else's name, and she was leaping randomly from topic to topic. So I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm going to say that I'll bet you can't really recall most of what she said to you in any detail. What you do recall are the random topics that she hit on that had an emotional and personal connection to you. And some of that may just have been random guesswork, but others may have come from non-verbal cues that she picked up on. You're in charge of the computers, aren't you? Well, that could mean anything. She could have picked up on how you were dressed, what you were carrying, what you were reading, where you were when you got on the bus. Any of these things could have given her a clue that you work in IT. Alternatively, it could have meant something totally different. I've been watching you sounds a bit paranoid and Orwellian. And how are the men in black watching us all? Well, they're doing it with computers. If you spoke to her, which I assume you did as part of this conversation, then she would have picked up on your accent, and it's obvious, even to me, that you aren't a native of New England. And when she said, "I can get your brother back for you," that would have struck a chord because of your recent bereavement. But remember that she wasn't even really talking to you. She was talking to Bobby, or George, or maybe even to herself. You don't know whether she was even looking at you when she said that, because you weren't looking at her. "I can get your brother back" is a pretty vague statement. It had a substantial emotional resonance for you because of your personal circumstances, but it isn't any indication of any special level of perception. Chances are that you have siblings, and you have a much better than 50% chance that at least one of your siblings will be a brother. That's not psychic ability, that's better odds than a coin toss. "I can get your brother back" doesn't mention anybody's death. That was your interpretation of what she said, and it could mean anything from communicating with an estranged relative to executing revenge on somebody. Any relevance to you in that statement was created purely by you. After all, if she'd have mentioned your pet rhinoceros, you'd just have discarded that statement as another one of those nonsense ramblings. Oracles, psychics, mediums, astrological horoscopes, reading of a small animal's entrails, all of these involve vague statements that the recipient selectively interprets to fit what they know, experience, or desire, and it can be very effective. As you say, just because you don't believe in the supernatural doesn't mean that you can't get creeped out by something you can't explain. You can be somebody who doesn't believe in ghosts and still have the shit scared clean out of you by spending a night in a creepy, creaky old house that has a reputation for being haunted. You can get caught up in the moment. And that's what I see here, especially at the end, where you say that as you left the bus, she asked you about Mephisto and Latin and Greek. And rather than just dismiss these as yet more random statements from somebody who is a bit confused and perhaps has some mental problems, at this point it's almost as if you're actively looking for more meaning in what she said. You've started to buy into the spookiness of it all. I'm not suggesting that this woman was out to con you. What I'm suggesting is that the oddity of the situation created a mental state in which you found yourself believing that this woman knows what you do for a living, knows where you come from, and knows that you recently lost a brother. And the impact of our emotions in these situations can make them seem much more real than they really are. Because, from what you've said, the only one of the two of you who knew all of these things was you. And everything that she said was reinterpreted based on what you know about you. And that was done in such a way that it just reinforced the illusion that she knew it too. Unsettling? Yes. Supernatural? No.